In this video, we'll be looking at the various ways that we can select parts of our image. Generally, when we're making selections, it's because we're trying to isolate a certain part of the photo in order to manipulate it or retouch it in some way. So our main selection tools are available to us in our toolbar over here on the left, and it's generally these top three ones here that we will work with. The very top is our move tool. That's when we want to move a layer around the document. But then if we want to select certain pixels within a layer, we need to use some of these selection tools. So with the first set of selection tools here, I'll click on this one here with my rectangular selection tool. When I select that, we can see that the properties that are available to us up here in the control panel, we need to check these before we start to use the tool. The first mode that we've got to choose from when we're using our selection tools is this new selection mode here. So what that means is when I come down and click and drag to create a selection, I get these marching ants. And inside of these marching ants is the selected area. So if I was to run some sort of a filter or adjustment, it would only affect the pixels within this particular area of marching ants. Now when I'm in this new selection mode and I come across and create a new selection, we can see that I lost the previous selection. So new selection mode basically deselects the previously selected area. If I wanted to continue to add into this selection, then I've got to choose the next mode along this add to selection. So I'll select that, and we can see now when I click and drag to create a selection, it continues to add more and more pixels into the selection, and I can work my way around there. In order to remove pixels from the selection, I've got to move across to my subtract from mode. So by clicking on that, I can now click across an area to remove pixels from the selected area. And then finally we have our intersect. Now this intersect mode isn't used as much, and what that will do is it'll retain pixels that I now click over the top of that are already selected. So it'll just keep that area there where I've overlapped the two. Now when I want to deselect all of the pixels on my layer, I can come up to my select menu and then come down and deselect. We can see that from here we can also select all the pixels on a layer, or we can inverse the selection so it'll select the opposite of what we've got selected. Now I'm going to just deselect from here. When I come back to this rectangular selection tool, we can see that I've also got an elliptical marquee tool, a single row and a single column of pixels. With my elliptical marquee, we can see that I can draw circles with that. The shortcut for deselecting is Command D or Control D on a PC. Underneath these selection tools, we have our lasso tools, and there's three to choose from. The first lasso tool we can see has the same type of modes to choose from: the new, add to, subtract from, and intersect. So if I stick to my add to mode, with this lasso tool I can click and drag, and this is great for creating very quick organic type shapes with my selection. I'll come back to where I started, and I've now got a selection area there. If I wanted to add more in, I can just scoop around and continue to grow that selection by expanding out from its edges. To subtract from the selection, I'll choose my subtract from mode. Now when I'm using some of my selection tools, I've also got a feathering option available on some of them. What this feathering option does is it softens the edges of your selection. I'll just deselect what I have selected here and show you back with this rectangular marquee tool. So with the rectangular marquee tool, I'll switch to the add to selection mode and I'll use zero feathering for the first selection. Now for my second selection, I'll go in and I'll add 20 pixels of feathering. So when I draw the next rectangle, you'll notice that the edges of this are slightly rounded compared to the first. And if I now unlock the layer by coming across to the layers panel and unlock it from there, I can now delete the pixels that are within my selection. So I'll hit delete on the keyboard, and we can see that the first selection has quite a sharp edge, whereas my second selection is quite soft and feathered. I'll just undo that by doing Control Z or Command Z on a Mac, and then I'll deselect by Command or Control D to deselect those. So back to my lasso tools, we've also got the Polygonal Lasso tool. Now this one's a little bit different to the Lasso tool because the Polygonal Lasso tool allows me to come in and click and drop an anchor, and then I get this little line that hangs off my anchor, and then I can continue to work my way around by clicking and releasing, dropping little lines around the outside of my shape. So this tool is really great if you've got organic shapes that you need to trace. You can get right in there and drop anchor points and work your way around the outside. Once you've traced around the shape, you would come back to the very starting point. When I come back to here, you'll see a little circle appear in the lower right corner, and then I can click on that and I've now created a selection. We can see with this tool, we've also got the option to add to and subtract from as well as a feathering option. Often we have the anti-alias turned on with these tools as well, because that will help to smooth out our edges. If I wanted to remove some of this selection, then I just come across with this tool into my subtract from mode, and let's just say I want to get rid of this area. So I'll come in and I'll click around the area that I'd like to remove from the selection, come back to that first point that I started from, and that has now eaten away at the selection. I'll Command or Control D to deselect that, and coming back to my lasso tools again, the final one is the magnetic lasso tool. So the magnetic lasso tool also has the same modes. I'm going to stick with the add to mode with this. So I'm going to work my way around this shape by clicking and holding and dragging. I can release once I've dragged slightly, and then I'm just going to work my way around the outside. And you can see what's happening. It's adding these anchor points to the shape. So Photoshop's actually recognizing the edge. This selection tool works well when you've got a subject that is in high contrast to the background, and we can see because this flower is in high contrast to the background, it's picking up the edges quite well. So all I'm doing is just dragging my mouse around the outside. You can also click with it if you want to get the lasso to click and select certain areas. Otherwise, just drag it around and it will pick the edge up for you, and you would just work your way around the whole edge and then back to the start. I'll just quickly dash across the middle of the flower and come back to the first point and click on there, and I've now created a selection with that. I'll just Command or Control D to deselect that selection. And the last set of selection tools we've got here, if I click and hold down, we've got our quick selection tool and our magic wand tool. Now both of these tools select our pixels based on their color. So with the quick selection tool, I'll select that, and you can see here that I've also got a new add and subtract from mode. And with this tool as well, you've got the ability to change the size of the tool or the size of the brush. So I can drag that along. So if I hover the brush over the page, we can see that I can drag that up a little bit higher so I get a larger brush size. I've also got the ability to change the edge. If I want a really sharp edge, then I'll leave the hardness up at 100%. For more of a softer airbrushed edge, we'll take it down. I'll leave this up at 100% and I'll bring the size up a little bit more and then come across to the flower. And with this, I'm just going to click and drag around with this tool, and you can see that as I work my way around the flower, it's picking up the edges quite well there. It's detecting the pink and white pixels and it's doing a pretty good job at selecting most of it. I might need to come in and select some of these other pixels on the edge that didn't quite get picked up, this petal here, and also the center here. I'll click and drag into there to add into the selection. So that's done a pretty good job at selecting most of that. But I'll deselect that, Command or Control D to deselect, and then I'll come back, click and hold down and go to the magic wand tool. So this tool is also great at selecting pixels that are similar in color. I'll stick with my add to mode from here, and then the important setting with this tool is to check the tolerance. Basically, the higher this number, the more sensitive the wand becomes. So if I want to pick up quite a lot of pixels, I would bump that up to maybe 20 or 30. I'll see how I go at a tolerance of 10 to begin with by coming down and clicking on part of my petals. You can see here that as I'm going around, it is selecting the petals, but I could probably get it to move a little bit quicker by coming up and bumping up this tolerance, say to 30, and then coming back down, and we can see that by doing that, it's picking up more of my petals. I could probably afford to take it up even further. I'll take it up to 45 and then work my way around, and we can see that that's picked up most of the petals there. Now when we're using our selection tools, you can also combine the tools. So we might start off with our magic wand, but then maybe for this middle section here, I need to change across to one of my other selection tools. Say for example, the Elliptical Marquee tool. So providing I'm on the Elliptical Marquee tool in the add to mode, I can now come over to my selected area and just click and drag across the flower, and it's going to pick up all of these pixels that weren't included with my magic wand. So I just drag over the top of those. Or alternatively, I could also come across to my Lasso tool, and providing I'm on the Add To mode, I'll bring the feathering down to 0 pixels, and I can now come in and just lasso around any pixels that should be included as part of the flower and just work my way around. So we can combine our selection tools. We don't have to stick to just the one tool when we're making our selection. Once I've made the selection, I'm then able to make changes to the selected area. So for example, I might change the color of these petals or run a filter on it to sharpen it or soften it. Great, so that's just a quick introduction to our main selection tools that we have here in the toolbar. In the next video, once we've made a selection, we'll take a look at how we can do things like change the colors using our adjustment panel. See you in the next video.